This week, Katherine Teitler, aka KT, the Director of Content for MISTI, will join us to talk about past and future InfoSec World events, as well as some other topics as well. Our next interview on the show features Masha Sedova. Now, I say Masha, I believe that's how the correct pronunciation. That's not my Rhode Island accent, just for our listeners out there that might think that. She is the co-founder of Elevate Security. She'll be here to discuss security awareness training, among other topics in that realm. Masha's giving the keynote, one of the keynotes at the upcoming Source Boston conference titled Using Behavioral Science to Secure Your Organization. In the security news this week, thinking differently about the relationship between security and development, EEG devices are vulnerable, new Cisco iOS exploits, and if you're running older Intel chips, you may never see a Spectre patch. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. I'm, of course, your host, Paul Asadorian, excited to be here, as always, on Paul's Security Weekly.
Hi, and welcome to the show. I totally introduce our host right now, but I've got a totally awkward boner.
What? Where? Oh, hey! I'm in the studio with you guys. That's kind of cool.
Sounds like a plan.
And we'll at least have one person listening.
That's right. Just
yeah, I know, and I appreciate it, and I'm glad you enjoyed your spooning with Jeff. But you know,
hey, that's actually built a new office.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, third baby on the way, so I needed a new office.
Nice.
I lost my old office. That's now the baby room.
Brought to you by
NetSparker, the developers of desktop and cloud-based web application security scanners that enable you to automatically identify vulnerabilities in your web applications and web services. NetSparker scanners employ a unique and dead-accurate vulnerability scanning engine that automatically verifies vulnerabilities with their proof of concept. For more information, visit them on the web at netsparker.com or email at contact@netsparker.com. In 2017, an increasing number of companies reported they did not have effective insider threat detection methods. LogRhythm's UEBA solutions enable you to detect and neutralize user-based threats in real time, while built-in scenario and behavior-based analytics empower you to expose insider threats, compromised accounts, and privilege misuse. Visit LogRhythm.com to learn how their UEBA solutions can help you expand visibility and enhance detection capabilities. Welcome, everyone, to episode 554 of Paul's Security Weekly. Excuse me, it is in fact April 5th, 2018. I'm in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. Everyone else is somewhere else on the lines via Skype. So that's just it's always weird being alone here in the studio and everyone else is on virtually. So our virtual guests, I'll start with the Security Weekly hosts. In order of their least frequent appearance in any given time frame, Not Kevin has joined us this evening. I'm very excited. Not Kevin, welcome to the program.
Hello, Paul. Thanks for having me again.
That looks like a really tall window behind you.
It is actually infinitely tall.
Oh, okay. Just checking.
That might be a hard fact.
Awesome. So also on the lines via Skype with some jet lag along with him, Mr. Joff Thayer. Joff, welcome to the program.
well, g'day, Paul. Yeah, I'm here. Jet lag, just returned from the other side of the planet again. But boy, it's good to be here, and I'm glad I was not on the top of the least frequent hosts list.
You're not the least freakiest by any stretch of the imagination. It seems like there's more boxes that just keep, like, every time you come on the show, there's like more boxes. Like, I'm just waiting for the point where all we see is your head because everything else is boxes behind you.
You're like my box. That's Grandma's coffin there. And
yes.
No, otherwise known as a new truck grill for my vehicle that's parked outside. So.
Yes, that's when I call it when. Never mind. So Mr. Jeff Mann is on the lines via Skype. Jeff, welcome to the program.
Hey, good to be here as always, Paul.
And Jeff, have we solidified that you'll be at RSA?
We have solidified it.
Did you find like a way to get there and somewhere to stay? logistics.
I have air travel. I have accommodations. I'm set for the week, and I have a quickly filling dance card. Many people want to talk to me for some reason.
Yeah, imagine that. So Jeff will be at RSA and available to talk to, well, basically people that we decide or Jeff decides that we want Jeff to talk to or Jeff wants to talk to. So
I'll talk to as many people as I can squeeze in. And standing offer, I'll talk about my NSA days if you buy me a drink at the bar.
There you go.
And he'll even dance with you.
I did not say that.
He did say to have a dance card, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that's a marketing term for your schedule.
Your schedule.
Oh,
Yep.
scheduled it.
So, excuse me, I am still getting over a cold. So I've got bourbon and beer and cigars to help me with that, though, that's my own medicine. But Katherine Teitler is here.
Lovely mood lighting.
And some lovely mood lighting. That always helps. Katherine Teitler is here from MISTI. She's the director of content, where she wrangles speakers and writes a fantastic blog and develops content for MISTI. Katherine, welcome back to the show.
Hello, thanks for having me.
And you're not actually here this time. You're on the lines via Skype, which
I am.
we'll take it. We'd prefer to have everyone here in studio, but of course, it doesn't always work out. But it's nice to have you here this evening. I wanted to start by asking you, Katherine, what were some of the more popular talks by dashingly handsome presenters?
Well,
named
that
Paul?
doesn't seem like, a complete toss-up or anything, Paul. So we had a lot of really good talks this year. Paul's talk was in the top 10 most popular of the conference, along with his friend Dave Kennedy's talk.
I think I was number 4, and Dave was somewhere after that, just for the record.
Just to clarify,
Just clarifying
there were
that.
5 more people in Paul's talk than there were in Dave's talk. So now that we have that settled, there were a lot of great talks. The most popular talk was about fileless malware. There was a talk about the dark web that a lot of people attended. It was standing room only. There was a talk by Bill Dean about what do we learn from compromises. That was also pretty much packed, standing room only. I was in the back for that one. So there were a lot of really good talks this year that people were sort of packed into very neatly at Infosec World. So that was great.
Katherine, tell me a little bit about the demographics for the event. It seems to be actually kind of similar, I think, to Source Boston, where there's a mixture of security researchers, security professionals, those from industry, and even, I think, given MISTI's history, those from auditing as well. Do you have like a breakdown, or am I way off in the demographics?
Yeah, no, that's definitely accurate. The biggest group of people are sort of in that mid-tier, security managers, directors, from very large companies, which was actually a surprise to me when I started at MISTI 4 years ago. So very large companies over 5,000 people. Our top industry tends to be, industries tend to be government, military, finance, and healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
We do get about 11-12% auditors at the event because MISTI, there are 2 sides. There's the security side and then there's the auditing side. I don't know anything about auditing, so I don't work on the auditing side, but actually more of our trainings and events are on the auditing side because we have seminars and there are about 200 of them each year. But because of that, we get a lot of people, a lot of auditors who want to attend the security events. So yeah, about 11-12% there. But the biggest bulk are sort of those mid-level folks with 10 to 15 years experience in security. And this year we did a lot more hands-on talks and tracks and workshops. So that was really fun.
And also, this was the first year you featured a Capture the Flag event. How did that go? And how was that set up?
It turned out really great. I was really nervous because MISTI historically has not been known for our more technical side. It's always been pretty high level talks, and I've tried to change that a bit. And so this year we set up a Capture the Flag. It was run by Josh Marpet and Scott Lyons. We had 18 people who actually participated and one person who participated remotely. And it was about 5 hours. It was on the expo floor, and it was the title was Pros versus Joes, and the task was to break into a simulated company. And so Josh and Scott walked people through things that they didn't necessarily know. There was one woman who had never done a Capture the Flag, came up, said, my tech skills aren't great, but she participated. She actually completed the challenge. The winning team, they were all people who had participated in other Capture the Flag events, but it was great. It was a lot of fun, and I think a good success for an organization that had never done it. This was the 24th year of the conference, and we'd never gone there, and so I was pretty excited, and I think the plan is definitely to do it and expand it again next year.
That's awesome. And so what did they get as a prize?
So the winning team was 4 people, and they each got a pass to next year's Infosec World.
That's awesome.
Yep.
That's really cool. So I think I know the answer to this question, and you'll probably are probably still mad at me, but what was your greatest challenge that you had to overcome during the conference, and how did you face that adversity?
Yet another layup, Paul. No, you're expecting me to say wrangling the speakers and getting their decks. That's always.
Oh, there's that. I guess there's multiple things too, because calling me in a pinch wasn't very helpful to you, and I do feel bad about that. Sorry.
Yeah, I know you do. No, I think the biggest challenge this year was the fact that we had so many hands-on workshops and the Capture the Flag, and setting up the tech for some of this stuff wasn't anything that MISTI had done before. Mm-hmm. And even our AV team hadn't worked on events like this. So there were some little glitches that we had to work through. At one point, I had to call one of my other speakers to help another speaker set up his workshop because the bandwidth wasn't working for us. And so that was the biggest challenge because everything was on site, and actually getting people at MISTI to agree to some of the requirements of having more tech-heavy sessions at the conference was a big challenge, because I don't think they realized that having more hands-on workshops and hands-on sessions it didn't just mean getting more speakers. There were actual requirements that would necessitate changes to our operating plan.
So, Katie, what advice do you have for those in the community that are thinking about planning a conference or organizing a conference? Maybe they're in the stages of doing that, or they're considering doing that. What advice do you have for them?
Run.
No, come on. Encouraging words.
Encouraging words. Drink.
Drink heavily. Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. I think the best part of the job is working with people, even people who are very difficult to wrangle, like Paul.
Hey now.
But the number one thing is just being hyper organized and having some system where you can track everything, because putting together a conference is more than just calling up your friends and saying, hey, you want to speak? You can do that, and there are certainly conferences that do that. But to make it pretty seamless and to make sure everything, all the trains run on time, it just takes a lot of organization. But for me, it's also been an opportunity to get to know people in the community and work a lot more closely. And I think building those relationships has definitely helped, because over the years, I've seen people feel like they're more accountable for their own stuff at Infosec World than at the beginning when I first had them speaking, because they know me and they know MISTI and they know the event. Whereas, some people who come in for the first time, there are so many conferences. There are probably 10 conferences a week in security. So a lot of speakers, they fly in, do a thing and leave. But Infosec World has really become a place where people like to go, and they feel like it's an annual thing that they like to be part of. And I've definitely felt things get a little bit easier over the past 4 years as I've built better relationships with people and had them understand what some of my challenges are. There were speakers who my first year refused to give me their decks because they were afraid of what would happen, their presentation decks before the conference. And now some of those people happily send me the presentation decks for review because they trust me and they know I'm not going to post it on Twitter or something stupid. And if they say, I'll give it to you for review, but please don't send it out publicly, the trust is there. So that's a really big thing too, is just developing those relationships and being honest and being truthful about it and not trying to,
I share at one point I shared my slide deck with you on Google Slides, and Katherine gave me some great feedback, and I wish more conferences, first and foremost built that trust, right? And then secondly, actually helped their speakers with, hey, I can review it and just make sure you're not like missing this or missing that or spelling and grammar or like I don't understand this slide. Like you may want to consider that. That's all useful feedback that it doesn't matter if it's your first time presenting or whether you're a seasoned presenter, you always have to welcome that feedback no matter where you fall on the speaker experience scale. And now you had some first-time speakers. Did you coach them a little bit, both before, during, and after the event?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the biggest thing is, first and foremost, I'm an editor and I'm a writer. And so I come at presentations from a totally different point of view. And even, folks like you, Paul, you know exactly what you're thinking when you put together a presentation. But what you're thinking in your head might not be translating correctly. And that's
Absolutely.
why they're editors. It's not because, some people are afraid to give me decks because they think, oh, she'll change things, or maybe she doesn't understand them, or, there are a lot of fears about it. And so that's been something I've had to work through with people. First time folks, it depends how I get to know them. People who come in through the CFP are generally a little more willing to work with me than folks who are submitted to the CFP through like a PR or a marketing firm. That's always a big challenge because you don't start with the initial relationship, whereas somebody who's submitting themselves through the CFP, they kind of get it. They kind of understand. And it takes a longer time to build up a relationship and then trust. But yeah, people are generally pretty agreeable and open to feedback. I have to position it correctly. I have to make sure that they understand that I'm just your second set of eyes. I'm just the person who's going to look through this and make sure everything is how you want it. And I will not change anything unless I tell you first.
Now,
I'm not going to go in and mess up your content. Wendy Nather and I had a huge joke online about how I was going to change her slides around because she was going to miss my deadline. Yeah. And it was a joke. And then she put something out on Twitter about it, and people were like, "Oh, I would hate that. That's terrible." I don't think. I guess I can only speak for myself. I would never change something on someone unless I told them,
right,
or asked them first.
It's somewhat inside baseball, but PR firms and marketing agencies, we probably get just like behind the scenes of Security Weekly, we get at least 3 or 4 emails per day. Across the entire team, sometimes more, from a PR firm or marketing agency that has people that they represent, or organizations and people that they represent that they want to get exposure for. And I find, and I don't know if your experience is similar, Katherine, that there's a very small percentage that you can work really well with. And the rest, they don't get so many things. They don't understand the content. They don't understand really truly what problems are being solved by whatever company they work for. They don't understand the process of how we work in security and present to conferences and appear on podcasts. They're just kind of lost, and they extend out the process. Have you found that too, working with PR companies and marketing agencies in security?
Absolutely. It's the same thing. And 2 years ago, I changed the form for our CFP to require that every submission had the presenter's contact information. And we said pretty clearly in the notes that if the contact information of the presenter is not included, the submission will be automatically rejected. Now, last year for the 2017 event, I was a little more lenient with it, and I would go back to PR people and say, listen, I can't accept this. I can't even have my advisory board review it with me if we don't know how to get in touch with the speaker.
Right.
This year for 2018, I just wrote back to people and I said, sorry, per the instructions, we cannot consider this. And the reason for that isn't to cut out the PR person or be a control freak. It's that if the organization who's putting on the event doesn't have any contact with the speaker, I will tell you that 9 times out of 10, that presentation gets terrible marks, terrible reviews, because the speaker is coming in, they're being sent somewhere. They don't really know what the event's about.
They don't know the audience.
Demographics. Exactly. And they don't get great scores because they're flying in, flying out, and the PR person has said, go here, go there, go, wherever. And so this year, nobody who had a submission by a PR firm that I couldn't contact was included. So
and there are good ones too. In fact, our sponsor here, DigiCert, is represented by a PR company whom I just love. I mean, they are just a joy to work with. They had calls with us and they're like, Paul, you don't have to sell us. Like, we just want to pick your brain. And I'm like, okay, I'll do that. And they had really awesome questions and they were trying to learn. Those are the PR companies and marketing agencies that I will work with that really want to learn and understand and take the time to do that. And it can be a great way to get content for those of you out there that may be having a conference. Don't discount them, but learn to kind of separate them out, which is somewhat of a process.
Yeah, no, it's true. There was one PR person who she submitted a person for InfoSec World. The person was not accepted. However, she kept in touch with me and we had a bunch of good email exchanges, and I needed somebody for another event. I ended up reaching out to her because she was so easy to work with. She was so understanding. She wasn't trying to hide the client she was working for. And she actually supplied a subject matter expert for 2 blog posts for me.
Yeah, so awesome.
It can actually benefit a PR person by not gatekeeping their subject matter experts.
Yeah.
But I think there's a fear of, if I let whomever, whether it's a blog or a media company or an events company, know who this person is, they're going to start spamming my client. And that's not why I want the client's email address. I want the client's email address because they're a speaker at the event and I need to know who they are. So if somebody's willing to be open to that and open to feedback, ultimately it's just a better relationship.
Yeah, it's really funny. We get that sometimes too. The PR company will reach out to us, or the marketing agency or media agency, and they're like, "Hey, can you send us, send us your rate card because, hey, we're representing some clients that might be interested." And we're like, "Well, who's your clients?" And they're like, "Send us your rate card." And like you can go in like this infinite loop, and it's like we don't work like that. Like if you tell us the name of the company, there's an initial vetting process that we go through to say whether it's like even worth our time to continue this conversation for this particular client. And that helps everyone, right? Like I'm going to tell you right away, like if they're not in security, for example, probably not worth talking to us. Our audience is all about security. So we can just, discount that right away. So by hiding their client, like they're not doing anyone, including their client, any favors.
Right. Yeah. No, there's no reason to gatekeep a client. I have no inclination and no time to start sending random security practitioners marketing messages. I don't even work in marketing. So I guarantee I'm not going to start sending them 4 newsletters a day.
Right.
But I think that's the fear with PR agencies, and the ones who get it and understand are great. The ones who don't and say, this is the way we're going to work, and MISTI's not the only one. We let PR firms submit speakers. RSA doesn't.
Right.
So there are plenty of conferences that say, nope, it has to be the speaker who submits.
So in terms of next year, are you already thinking about next year now? And so what can we expect from, like, what worked this year that's going to carry forward? What new things are you building on to 2019, specifically for the Orlando conference?
Yes. This is definitely a 12-month process, and there's a little respite in between finishing up 2018 and starting 2019 of about a few weeks, but the feedback, I just sent out the speaker evaluations on yesterday, I guess. So that was my final wrap up for the show. So I was able to see what talks did well, what talks didn't, what can use, a little TLC for next year. I think overwhelmingly our hands-on workshops went incredibly well. So the guys from Trusted Sec came back for the second year, Ben and Larry, and did a threat hunting workshop. We had an OSINT workshop. We had a defending your enterprise with nothing but your wits. It was basically, how to use Windows and not spend a huge amount of money on products.
That's awesome. I like that one a lot.
We had a couple of folks from Offensive Security come in and do the Kali Dojo.
Oh yeah, Johnny Long was there, which I didn't actually know he was going to be there, and I'm sitting there talking to someone. I think it was Adrian Santabria, and I turn around and there was Johnny. I'm like, oh, that's awesome.
Yep, and I was really worried about it. Having them come in and do a workshop, I was like, oh my God, this is going to be way too far past anything we've ever done in InfoSec World. But they had 20 people in the room. Everybody stayed for the entire time. Everybody got a lot out of it. The reviews were excellent. Johnny was amazing to work with. He had Elen Hernandez come in as well, who was great. And
Johnny too, in a classroom setting, Johnny's one of the easiest people in our field to talk to. And so I can see that translating to the classroom and really improving the scores, that the students are giving, because he's just such an easy person to talk to.
Yeah, no, my fear wasn't about any of the instructors. My fear was that MISTI had never had those kinds of deep technical workshops before. And I peppered in a few of them over the past few years, but this year we had 6 pretty technical workshops that inquired pre-installs and things like that. And it went well. People loved it. So we will definitely do that next year. We will definitely do another CTF. We're hoping to get more students involved. We would love to have more of an academic presence there. Some people in college programs for sure, and maybe even some high school programs participate. That was one of the things we hope to be able to do this year that we weren't able to. So next year we're going to work on that. And then we have a few other things that I can't really talk about yet, but had a really interesting call with somebody that probably everybody on this podcast knows, who's thinking of doing something pretty innovative with us next year.
And that's what I really like about InfoSec World. And we like to think sometimes here at Security Weekly that we do actually some level of diversification as to which conferences we attend in any given year. And I think that a conference has to be at some kind of certain level where we'll just do that conference every year regardless. And one of those qualifying characteristics is the conference is constantly expanding, adding on more content, more activities, more vendors, more attendees, different workshops, and just continuing the activities. InfoSec World has done that, I believe, consistently throughout the years, making it's a conference we do every year because of all those diversification of activities and speakers and events. It's really of great value for us to be there, for us to encourage our audience to be there as well. So I think that's, props to you, KT. I think that's one of the great things about InfoSec World.
Yeah, it's really fun. I love going because it's sort of the culmination of about, with the speakers, about 8-9 months of work. And so you get to actually see everybody on site. And this year we had a lot of fun stuff going on. Even just on the expo floor, we had an escape room and, just fun things that are relevant to the community, but are also sort of fun diversions and team building and things like that. That's cool.
That's great. To the other illustrious Security Weekly host, questions for Katherine about InfoSec World, which has been the majority of the conversation so far.
I got nothing.
Okay.
Punt it over to Jeff.
Joff is jet lagged, so we gotta give him a pass there. So
that's right. Brain spacing.
I hear you, dude.
How does one get on the CFP list if they might want to speak at InfoSec World?
Great
or when do you
question.
usually send out open it up?
Good question. So one can
Especially if you don't have a PR firm back.
That's right.
if you don't have a PR firm, you're probably better off.
That's true.
One can either email me, or there's actually a form on the MISTI website, and I think it's a drop down, and it says something like "Want to speak for MISTI," and you can fill out that form, and you're automatically added to a list. I keep this ginormous spreadsheet that's probably unnecessary, that I email to my director of marketing before every show, and I say, make sure all of these people are on it. So every request that comes in gets fed through there.
I will also say, if you're in the community and you are speaking or submitting something to speak, contact us and say, hey, we heard you talk about it on the show, and we'll communicate that to KT and make sure that our community is involved, because I think it's an awesome conference that I want more people in our community involved in. So everyone should be considered, and if you want to speak at a conference, it's a great one. I mean, how many years have I spoken and been involved with the conference? At least 3 or 4.
Well, this was my 4th year, and you've been involved every year. I don't know if you were there before.
And a lot of it is word of mouth too, and it's one of the things I wanted to ask you, Katherine, is when you find new speakers, I think the way that you and I met was, I think Dave Kennedy was like, hey, you asked him, like, what other speakers should I consider? And Dave was recommending some, folks he was friends with. Of course, Dave and I have been friends for some time. Is that one of the best ways to get speakers, is really just kind of word of mouth and asking your existing speakers to recommend people?
Yeah, definitely. It's a lot of community building, and, I don't know everybody in the community, obviously, and people who go and speak at other events also hear other speakers. And I only get to go to a small number of events, so I can't hear everybody. So it's absolutely great when a speaker will say, oh, I heard this person. Mm-hmm. You definitely have to talk to this. That's what happened with Keith Hoodlet. Mark Arnold, who was on the advisory board for this year, went to an event, saw Keith speak, and said, you got to talk to this guy. And so Keith submitted a CFP, and we obviously accepted him, and he did great. His scores were also in the top 10 of best talks at InfoSec World 2018. So
that validates us to a certain degree, because in that time frame of submitting talks to when the conference happened, Keith has become a host on the network here and actually has his own show on Security Weekly. And just in case anyone's wondering, I was also on the advisory board, and anyone that I had a previous relationship with and I was voting on their talk, I disclosed and said, like, I'm biased. Like, Dave Kennedy's name was on the list. I'm like full disclosure here, Dave and I have known each other probably 8 or 9 years now. So, like, take my vote for what it's worth, but there's totally biased in voting for certain people that I knew about and have had a relationship with. And Keith certainly was one of those folks. So,
well, however, I will say that the original instructions said that the names of the speakers were hidden. You could have left them hidden.
I had to see who it was, though.
But you could have left it hidden.
That's right. Yeah, but there was also I think InfoSec was a good mix of a lot of the booths. So my goal at InfoSec World was to visit a bunch of the as many different vendor booths as I could, for a lot of different reasons. One, I want to understand what vendors do. I want to get Security Weekly's name out there and be recognized in the vendor community as well. And there were a number of different vendors that were like, hey, our product evangelist was speaking, or someone was speaking from a vendor. And so one of the reasons I like InfoSec World is just the diversity, right? You may be someone from the community who submitted on their own. You might work for a vendor that's going through a PR firm. You may sponsor the event and send someone. And the audience has very positive things to say about all the talks they attended. So that's KT's work right there. And very well done.
The coolest thing for me, actually, so when I started, the whole idea of pay-for-play talks was like, it made me insane. Obviously, I understand there have to be a few spots on the program that vendors get to sponsor and send somebody to speak. But there are a few companies, sponsors, vendors who have come back again and again. And almost always, those sponsors, I have to work through their marketing team. And there are 3 or 4 vendors on the program who've gotten to know me over the years, and they're so much better to work with now that we've built a relationship. And they actually care so much about making sure that whomever their evangelist is, who's coming to InfoSec World, doesn't do any product pitch. And that was a huge challenge 4 years ago. And so now there are some vendor marketing people who I absolutely I get excited when I see their names, you have to call this person from this vendor, because I'm like, okay, this person I can really work with, and I can explain the concept of the conference, and, they'll really get it. And they're not just going to send somebody who comes in, comes out, and drops the name of the company 22 times.
Right.
During a 50-minute talk. So that's really cool too.
Now, for those that are listening, Katherine's not just someone who wrangles speakers. Katherine does a fantastic job writing many different articles on various topics on security for the blog on MISTI's website. And one of the articles that you wrote recently, Katherine, I thought was very interesting, and it begs the question, so breaches are in the headlines more than ever before, and so how can you avoid being the security scapegoat in a lot of these situations? I love that article, by the way.
Yeah. It's a lot of what we talk about in security and what people come and talk about at conferences, but that we're not very good at doing in the security industry, which is really working with the business and focusing on risk. I was actually having a conversation with somebody earlier today about risk, and this person works in the financial services industry, and risk to them means something different than it means to security people, but it really shouldn't mean something different to security people. And the whole point is security has to work a lot more closely to understand what risk means to the business, because we tend to think of security as the be-all, end-all. And with breaches in the news, obviously, everybody knows about security and passwords and breaches. My parents know about it. It's not something that is this dark, mysterious corner of the business anymore. But security is there to aid the business. And I think a lot of the time we tend to think about security as you must do this, you must do that. But it's really just a matter of risk for the business. When a company decides to make a new product or open a new office in, maybe a geography, there's some socio-political risk. There's always a matter of risk involved, and the business is used to dealing in shades of gray. And so I think the important thing for security practitioners is to realize that, we say it all the time, there is no such thing as absolute security. But then when we go and we talk to our peers and executives and boards and directors, we're like, we must avoid a breach. Well, that's A, probably not likely, and B, that's not really what they want to hear. They just want to understand, how do I keep my business running smoothly? How do I launch more products? How do I acquire new customers? Whatever the case may be, and what will happen? What are the impacts? Whether it's financial or business disruption, and that's what they want to know about, because it's going to happen, and not just from security, from lots of other things. Some pump can blow up, and you can lose computers or files or whatever.
And what I love about that is it represents what I think is forward thinking in security today, that it's not about security risk or business risk or financial risk. It's about risk, and all those factors come into play. And I believe, certainly in the past 5 years, that security is not as much of an island as it was before, that it's being incorporated in general risk to the business. Now, having said that, when we look at breaches, there's certainly a right way to handle the breach and a wrong way to handle the breach. I think Panera has certainly, as we've talked about this week on our various shows, exemplified not the right way to handle a breach.
Well, lying is never a good thing.
Never a good thing. Transparency is good, lying bad. Just
right, just to be clear.
Yeah.
Hey, Paul, I just wanted to make a comment that occurred to me, and maybe it's jet lag brain, so forgive me if this comes out wrong. But there's another thing that Katie just highlighted for me, perhaps a little off topic, but and that is, I don't think the information security industry, even though we are moving more into the mainstream in terms of that risk language, there's still a gap in the way we communicate, I think. We tend to be hyper-focused on information security issues to the point where we don't know how to talk business language. And I think we still have to bridge that gap.
I agree, Jeff.
Yeah. And actually, the finance person I was talking to today, one of the things he said to me was, well, why doesn't security just let the chief risk officer and their team calculate risk? And I said, well, they can't if they don't understand security, but we as an industry, security practitioners, need to be talking to our risk officers if we have them in our organization. And I don't think that's happening nearly as much as it should be, because risk people, that's their life, that's their job, that's what they live. And they know how to calculate risk.
Yeah, and I think that
it's
that
almost
threat,
like we
that
need
threat
to
modeling, aspect of it certainly is a great communication to have with your risk officer, chief risk officer, and their department. Right? Is they may not be thinking about it as creatively as some of us think about it in security, and certainly we can come up with a lot of very likely scenarios, but the risk office can help determine that likelihood and help put some context around that with the inputs from security.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that hits it pretty dead on. And the challenge, I think, for us in the information security industry is, how do we get information security integrated into a risk officer's profile in a meaningful way?
Well, it's a challenge. I mean, it's a challenge. And there are a lot of organizations who don't even have a risk function. Small and medium-sized businesses may not have a risk department. So, maybe working with finance, because they have their own calculations, and they're the ones who have that responsibility. I think it's building relationships and trust, and kind of like we were talking about even with Infosec World, just making sure that it's not sort of us against the world, which is kind of an historical Infosec persona. But it really is, and it sounds so cliche, and we've been saying it for years, but it is working with the business. And it's also sort of humbly going in there and saying, I know security, but I don't know risk. Mm-hmm. Or I know this little bit about risk, but I need to speak to the business in terms that works for them.
Katherine, yeah, and I think the net result too, if information security people at more senior level take that leap of talking to the business directly, I think the net result in any organization is information security would directly receive more funding.
Yeah, more funding, more support. When people don't understand things, just even taking a grander view, when people don't understand something, that's when they have a fear of it. And I think that's been sort of the downfall of security even today, is everybody knows what it is and what it can mean, with Panera or Equifax, or going back a few years, Home Depot or Target. Who hasn't shopped at one of those places? So people get it, but there's sort of this security sort of shrouded in this mystery, because security continues to talk about, CVEs and 0 days and known exploits and all this kind of stuff that other people don't care about so much.
Yeah, it's a language barrier, a language and a cultural barrier is what we're really talking about.
So, yeah. Katherine, next year at Infosec World, we will be at the same venue. And have you announced the dates? Can we already start planning now?
We can. You're going to ask me what those dates are, aren't you?
I am. Sorry. Put you on the spot. But it is, while you look that up, it is at Disney's Contemporary Resort
It is. It is at Disney's Contemporary Resort. We had a diversion last year. It wasn't Misty's doing. Disney kicked us out for the Spring Breakers. In 2019, the main conference dates, so there are pre and post conference workshops and summits, but the main event dates are April 1st through 3rd. And then in full disclosure, in 2020, we're moving venues. Again, not because we don't love the Contemporary, but because the Contemporary is doing things. We will still be on Disney property, but we will be at a brand new Disney property for Misty.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. I did not know that. That's good news. You know, the Contemporary is a nice resort. I think if you're going to go with your family, as I did this year, pretty much at the last minute, I was like, Catherine, by the way, I'm not going to make a lot of these other events because my family's coming out at the last minute. It's walking distance to the Magic Kingdom, and it's a pretty nice resort. I think over the years I've kind of learned to navigate the resort, figure out where the bars are, and various happenings and how to get around. It's been really cool. So that's great. Next year, Disney Contemporary Resort, a great place to bring your family. If they're coming out with you, if you're not, and if you're planning to attend, feel free to hit us up, on social media, email us. We can help you navigate. For sure, as I said before, it's a conference that every year Security Weekly will be at and support, because there's just so many things to be there and attend, and so many people to network with, and it's a great conference. So, Catherine, thank you very much for appearing on Security Weekly again, and kind of recapping this year's InfoSec World, and encouraging people to attend next year as well.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. With that, we're going to take a short break and come back with our next guest. Stay tuned.